All right, this is part 2 of Lucifer, one of God's greatest creations. Where did his first desire of sin against God, where did it came from? So now I did a part 1. I was on No Fugazi podcast with the host named Cooley. You could go subscribe to him. And we chopped it up, and I was asking him, where did Lucifer get the desire to sin against God, who created him good and with goodwill? And his reasons were that it's because of choice or free will. And in the first video, I did say I picked C and F before we even spoke. I guess he didn't understand what I was coming from until he brought about free will. And I said, yes, that's what I expected to hear. The letter C, choice, or the letter F for free will. And we chopped it up, and he gave me the explanation of why Lucifer sinned. And it was because of choice and free will. And in this video, I'm going to start my video off explaining some stuff from someone else, from a Christian channel, where I got this from, and so you can understand where I'm coming from, and you could understand a little bit more before I move on. And No Fugazi podcast is also in this second part, because in the first part, I let him speak a lot, and I took out my theories, because I do have a theory. Now, if I get to that theory in this part 2, then it should be. But if I can't get to this theory in part 2, it will be in part 3, because I'm not trying to go as far as 30 minutes on here, but still I have to get everything in order. And if it's not in order, and I can't get it done, I'll go to part 3, right? So we're continuing. Now, in the first one, we was talking about the heavens, and now we're talking about earth, but the answer still not can be answered, okay? But in this part 2, since I took my theory out, we still was talking, right? And he was giving his explanations of why he feels it's choice or free will. So I want to finish that up in this part. And also, in that whole video that me and Cooley did, there at the end, you know, I had to get off because there was other people that wanted to free debate. It was a debate. The debate on anything from Cooley, not from me, but it was from Cooley. But at the end, I left, and a lady came on with Islam faith, and she was explaining to Cooley that this is what we believe in. And I could also say, I could go full circle with what she is saying with Shaitan. And it still comes back to the question, what gave Lucifer, Shaitan, the first desire to sin against his creator? So let's go on, and I'm going to put a piece first, and then we'll get to the debate between me and Cooley on the Fugazi podcast. Let's go.
Jonathan Edwards, who claims that, number 1, free will is doing what we desire, but that 2, God gives us the desire to do good. And with that being said, and keeping James 1:13 in mind, I'm having trouble understanding where Lucifer received his first desire for sin. Norman Geisler says, quote, "The unmistakable logical conclusion for the extreme Calvinist is that both Lucifer and Adam sinned because God gave them the desire to sin first," end quote. I would imagine that Adam received his desire to sin from Eve, who received it from the serpent, from Satan. But if God is sovereign over all things, including all of our desires, would that make him the initial author of the first desire for sin in Satan? How do you answer this mystery?
For as many years as I can remember, I have said that among the mysteries in my theology, for which I do not have an adequate answer, one of them is the question, how? How is key word here. How did the first sin come about? And by first sin, I don't mean Adam's first sin. I mean Satan's first sin, the very first sin in the universe. The Bible opens not with the beginning of evil, but with the presence of unexplained evil. Man is created innocent, and the serpent is already there, deceitful, manifestly opposed to the God of creation. And that's where the Bible begins. And as far as I can see, No explanation is offered in the Bible for how Satan became evil. I know there are hints that he was a perfect angel, created by God. Jude says that he refers to angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, whom God has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. And I don't doubt that Satan was created good and fell from his proper place, like Jude says, because I don't think that evil and God are both eternal and ultimate realities. I'm not a dualist. God and his goodness and wisdom and power are the only ultimate eternal realities. And thus evil is somehow derivative, secondary, without God being a sinner. And all of that, virtually all Christians agree on. But how did Satan become evil? I do not know. And it is plain to me that those who believe in ultimate self-determination of God's creatures, like angels and humans, don't know either. To say that Satan had free will, that is ultimate self-determination, to say that Satan had free will is not an explanation for why he committed his first sin. It's a label. It's a label. It's not an explanation. It's a label of a mystery. How could a perfectly good being with a perfectly good will and a perfectly good heart ever experience any imperfect impulse that would cause the will to move in the direction of sin? And the answer is nobody knows, including those who say, oh, it's free will. That's not an explanation. It's a name for a mystery. So we don't know. The Bible doesn't explain the how of it. So Rob quotes Norman Geisler, who says, the unmistakable logical conclusion for the extreme Calvinist, for both Lucifer and Adam, that they sinned is because God gave them the desire to sin. Now, I'm not sure whether I qualify for Geisler's extreme Calvinist, but I strongly suspect that I do. But just at this point, I am disagreeing with that description of me, and I am saying, no, I am not driven to say God gave Lucifer his first desire to sin. That is an oversimplification of virtually everybody's viewpoint. I do not know how Lucifer came to feel his first inclination to rebel against God. But here is what I do know. God is indeed sovereign, and nothing comes to pass apart from his plan, which includes things he more or less causes directly and things he more or less permits indirectly. And there is no doubt in my mind that Satan's fall and all of the redemptive plan of God for the glory of his grace afterwards was according to God's eternal plan. But it is precisely at this point that the how of the causality of Satan's first sin worked, we do not know. I have a category in my thinking, in other words, for the fact that God can see to it that something come to pass which he hates. This is what he did, for example, when he planned the crucifixion of Jesus, according to Acts 4:27 and 4:28. The murder of Jesus was sinful, and it was planned down to the detail by God. You can read it in the Psalms, and you can read it in the New Testament. Precisely how God does that, maintaining his sinlessness and the sin of the things that comes about, and the moral accountability of those who do those sins. The how of that, I do not know. But I think the Bible leads us to believe that he is sovereign over all sin, and that he never sins. That is what I believe the Bible teaches. Now, how he does it, there might be hints in the Bible. And I am going to give you one pointer. And I do not claim this is an explanation, but it's worth thinking about as a pointer toward a possible explanation that maybe we'll understand someday. In Isaiah 63:17, the prophet cries out to the people, "O Lord, why do you make us wander from your ways?" Did you hear that? "Oh Lord, why do you make us wander from your ways and harden our heart so that we fear you not? Return for the sake of your servants, the tribes of your heritage." And so he ascribes to God the ultimate causality, somehow, of our wandering, Israel's wandering into sin. How did God do that? The second half of the verse says, "Return for the sake of your servants," suggesting, pointing that somehow God's absence did it. And then he says in Isaiah 64:7, this is what, 7 or 8 verses later, "There is no one here who calls upon your name, who rouses himself to take hold of you. For you have hidden your face from us and have made us melt in the hand of our iniquities." And so again, it's the hiding of his face that explains the sin. And I'm not saying this is a foolproof explanation of sin, like somehow God cloaked his glory from Lucifer And in the cloaking of his glory, somehow, still inexplicable to me, there rises a preference in Lucifer's heart for himself over God who has cloaked his glory. I don't know how that happens, but this is a pointer that something like that might have been going on. I'm simply saying this is worth pondering, that God may be able to govern the presence and absence of sin, not by direct active agency, but by concealing himself. I think it was Edwards who said, there's a difference between the way light is caused at 3 o'clock in the afternoon by the shining of the sun, and the way the shadows are caused by the blocking of that sun by the tree, though it is the light of the sun that is responsible for both the brightness of the day and the shadows under the tree. But I end where I began. How the very first sin in the universe came about is a mystery to me. I do not know how. What I am taught in the Bible is that God is sovereign over all things, including sin, and he himself is never a sinner.
That's very perceptive. And again, those passages are Isaiah 63, verse 17, and Isaiah 64, verse 7. I'm certainly going to look at those passages more carefully myself. Thank you, Pastor John.
So in the beginning, evil is present. It's present in the book, right? But it's unexplained presence. Okay, it's there, but it's not explained. You can't explain the desire or where Lucifer got the desire to sin and go against his creator that made him and the most beautiful, musical, just perfect being, right? How can something stronger than God's creation corrupt Lucifer? And I think we miss this all the time, or we use free will and choice is what beguiled the desire, right? And I also like when he said, when the sun rises and the sun hits the ray of earth and there's trees blocking it, well, what happens? What's get created? Well, the tree blocks it and then it creates a shadow. And who is responsible for the tree blocking the sun and creating that shadow? Well, the light. So now you could take that how you want it. You could say, oh, you're trying to say God created Lucifer, so Lucifer is the derivative of evil because God planned this. God has plans, of course. He knows the beginning and end. But I'm saying that God has nothing to do with evil at all. Nothing. He created Lucifer, but he still has nothing to do with evil. And where's that first desire of sin? Now, you can always tell me free will and choice. So let's get back into Cooley and No Fugazi podcast. And like I said, the first one, I took out my theory of where evil came from because, I want to hear that he's telling what he's telling me, and he still have more to tell me, and I couldn't do it in part one. So I'm still taking myself out, but I'm cutting certain parts. But believe me, I'm not cutting anything else. I'm cutting me out with my theory, and I'm trying to keep the theory to the last part. And if it happens in this part and this video, fine. If it's not, I'll make a third one. And my theory, I look for something to go against my theory because I don't want to think I'm right. I'm not right. I have the answer right now. The answer is we don't know. I don't know. But I can't speak for other people that think free choice, free will and choice is the answer to this equation. So let's move on and let's go on with the podcast and let's listen.
I understand your theory and your line of thinking now. And, many people, have those same thoughts. There's not really any new thoughts. There's not really any new thoughts. There's someone that thought of what you're thinking about right now. That thought that you just spoke of, that slipped in my mind at some point when I was young or at some moment too. And
in this part two, as we move on, I explained my theory, but I'm cutting it out. He said, okay, that idea that you have about where the desire of sin came from, well, I had that same thought as when I was a kid. But in part one, when I explained, before I got to my theory and I asked a question, he said, well, that's a good question. So now in my mind, when I listened to that and I play back, and he said, well, I was, as a kid, I had that same question in my head. It kind of made me kind of feel funny, like, well, my question is universal, which it is. There's no new thought under the sun. It is. But as a child, no, I have it as a child. I has as a young adult, and I still have this thought in my mind at 51 years old, right? And I'm not going to get the answers, but it just made it sound like, you know, and the first thing he said, it slipped my mind. And I can tell you right now, it didn't slip your mind. You was conditioned to believe it's choice and free will. That's a fact. Because you're not the only one that says choice or free will. So you've been conditioned for that. And there's no slip in your mind. You're not thinking about it anymore. See, me, I think about it not all the time, but it comes up in my mind. That's basically it. So let's move on. This is not about me and him and we going to war, because we on the same page, yo. Basically, God over man, man over woman, and woman over child. That's it. So I'm not going to war with simple words, but I'm just letting you know how certain people can get conditioned for it to slip your mind, and there's certain people that you're still thinking outside the box and not you're stuck in the box with your thoughts. All right, so move on.
So then God made free will. So then within the free will, he made evil. That's how you...
No, God didn't make evil.
Okay, so then, like... Okay.
Humans and angels, right, made evil. God only made free will, which is the ability to do good or to God made free will, the ability to obey or not obey. So think about it. If it wasn't free will, then you only could obey. But since it's free will, you can obey or you cannot obey. Make sense?
Yeah. Right, so the characteristics...
If you listen to what he said humans and angels made sin. Okay, now in the beginning of the video, I'm just going to put it out like this. He's defining evil by choice and free will. I'm explaining evil what I don't know, but I say that choice and free will is a label. It's not an explanation. Just like the man in the video in the beginning that I let you listen to so you can get a little bit closer to my meaning of what's going on in my head, because sometimes my good grammar and it's not as good, but that man had an explanation of the situation what I'm trying to explain to you, right? And he said free will and choice is a label. It's not an explanation to the reason of the desire of Lucifer having the first sin against his creator. So let's move on.
Like, okay, everything that happened in heaven and everything that's going to happen on earth is like a blueprint of what happened in heaven. Lucifer that became Satan begilded Eve and Adam, but that's the key part. He begilded those two beings. What begilded the being of Lucifer? If God is so good, God could create goodwill, but within that goodwill, within that will, that choice, that free choice, is a choice of good and evil. And my thing is that if God is good all the time, I don't believe that he gives you a choice. Just like in my theory, there's
So wait real quick, look.
Just like the blueprint of Lucifer begilding Adam and Eve, he gave you the slip of tongue and that choice, whether it was he said it, well, your eyes will be open, because remember there was two trees, the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. So I'm saying, like, if somebody begilded you, is either they have a slip tongue to say, well, your eyes will be open. Well, if your eyes are not open yet, what was the life then when you didn't recognize he was naked? So that's kind of my thing. It's a theory. The question is, no one knows. The question is no one, but it's only theories now. That's what
I can say that I know. It's so how you're viewing it is, right? You're limiting God.
So, he's telling me I'm limiting God, right? And his powers and his, he's telling me this. And, he's telling me this because of my theory, and I'm still cutting it out. So you're not going to get the whole theory, right? But he's saying that I'm limiting God because I don't believe God has anything to do with evil. He made Lucifer, and then Lucifer created evil because he's an angel. Well, Shaitan, is a different story. He's not an angel. But I'll get to that when that lady comes on, right? but it still come full circle. I always come back to this full circle, right? It's either one or the other. It's either God created Lucifer for him to become evil, so we can have the choice and the free will of good and evil. Now, if you're going to tell it to me like that, then hey, there's no argument, right? But if you're going to tell me that God is good all the time, sovereign, has nothing to do with evil, which I agree, he has nothing to do with evil, then how can I belittle God if I'm telling you he has nothing to do with evil? But at the same time, you're telling me that angels and men, and even if Shaitan, let's say Shaitan is not an angel, right? And he has free will, right? Well, it still goes back to the same circle. With free will comes what? A positive and a negative, or orange or an apple, or shades, or binoculars, or whatever it is. But in the category of free will and choice, you still have good and evil. But where did evil come from in Shaitan or Lucifer? That's the question. So now we move it on to Earth, and I'm going to let him talk about Earth, Adam and Eve, and let's just roll it.
I'll tell you, you're limiting God right now, my brother. The reason why you're limiting God is shrinking God and saying, well, God gave us free will, but, you believe in free will, right? Yes.
Of course.
But you're trying to limit the power that God has by saying that, you believe that God, so you believe two things is what you said. You said, I believe that God is always good. I also believe in free will. So with that, telling you, my dear brother, is that God is all powerful. So you're putting limits on free will and limit on the power that God has. I'll explain it one more time for you so it makes sense. And just walk with me, straight line here real quick. I'll make it quick. So God gave us free will. So you're saying all of these things. Well, where did the angels and Lucifer get these influences? And I'm telling you that free will is it's free. It's so free will. Think about this, for example. Guys that have weird fetishes, like foot fetishes and weird fetishes like that. Think about the pedos, the PFs. You get what I'm saying? I don't want to say the word on YouTube. The dudes that have an attraction for kids, the dudes that have attraction for other dudes. Think about all of these things that's ew, it's not normal. What is this? And I'm telling you is that God only made us how we are. Everything else we choose, right? We choose to do these things. We have our five senses that absorbs information. Other than that, we choose to do these things. So you're trying to limit the free will, the free reign that God gave us. You're trying to limit that free reign. I'm telling you, it's so free that people can really do some nonsensical, illogical, immoral stuff. As it is in heaven, as it is on earth. So they was doing that in heaven, disobeying God. God is just his word. Hey, I love you so much, so I'm going to tell you, so here's the reality of everything, right? I love you so much, so here's the reality. This is why the same thing God put the tree of life, the garden there, the apple, right? I love you so much. I want you to know that there is, a different perspective out there, and you do have a choice to do that. I love you so much, the angels in heaven. You do have a choice. You can listen to my word. You can obey me, or you can be disobedient, right? So that's love. Think about what your kid. I'm trying to hit it home. Do you have any kids?
Of course.
Got you. So you got kids. So think about your kids. If you trap your kid, right, in a closet all day, oh no, once you come home, you don't do nothing else. You do this. You kind of want your kid to I'll say it a different way. I'll say it a different way. You want your kid to explore things because that's how they grow, right? If you are so protective and being so controlling over your kid, you wouldn't really even want them to walk because it's a possibility that they could fall. And that can be viewed as bad. You wouldn't really even want them to climb or go up the stairs. Well, it's a possibility that something bad could happen, and that's not good. So a lot of good things come from free reign. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, so let me ask you something about, because I'll keep it on earth because we're talking more earth than heaven.
Yeah.
And how
the heaven stuff is a little,
I know.
theory.
I want to explain how Lucifer became who he is.
And one quick second. Let me go ahead and give my chat an update. Everyone that's in the chat right now, it's live debate night. So if you want to go ahead, and I'm just having a discussion with my brother here. He was the first one that joined the stream. But if you want to go ahead, I'll go ahead and let you talk, man.
All right, so since we work on earth, with the tree of life, and there's a tree of knowledge of good and evil. Am I correct? I just want to make sure. It's a tree of good and evil. That's what it says in the Bible, right? The knowledge of good and evil. So before Eve, Adam got beguiled by Satan, was it one way that they was thinking, or they still had a choice and they didn't even eat the apple of good and evil?
Yeah, I look at that story as not so, blanket statement. I look at it like, God made Adam and Eve. It's pretty much the first human beings, pretty perfect. Adam was perfect, at least, and then Eve came from Adam, right? And Adam spoke directly with God. He had a direct communication with the source. Eve didn't really have that direct communication with the source like Adam had. With that being said, is that God made them perfect, but he didn't put anything out there. The reality is things are perfect and things are imperfect, right? So that's just the reality of life. The reality of life is there are good things that can, help you prosper and give you peace and joyfulness, and then there are things that can truly harm you and do evil. And that symbol of the tree is just saying like, hey, here's my word. I'm going to give you my word. If you follow my word, you'll live forever. You won't die. You'll always be in peace and live a good life. If you disobey my word, that's when you will die, right? And all they did, I think that story is just a story to say that if you don't follow God's word, evil will happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, the story, the way you say it is, you said story. Is that
story is be obedient.
Okay, I understand that, but if there's what's the proof of them opening their eyes and seeing themselves naked? I guess that was just a metaphor then.
Well, that's a metaphor of, they actually see themselves. Think about it, like the word naked. Like naked is like you're not clothed. You're exposed, right? So think about being exposed. No one really wants to be exposed. So it's the mind of how we perceive things. They didn't perceive themselves as being exposed before, but once they bit the apple, they perceived themselves as being exposed, and they felt shameful of it, so they covered up. You get what I'm saying?
So at that point, they noticed. Okay. What I'm trying to understand is that before that situation, did they have any knowledge of good and evil?
I would say that they still had knowledge of. It's not about having knowledge of good and evil. That's not the thing. I'm sure they did. The key thing is what you choose to do. So you can have all of this knowledge, but then if you make a choice to then do good or evil, that's the main thing. And I think that God put the tree there, the symbol there, and it was like you either obey me or you choose to, you make something else your God. So the facts is that Eve made the serpent her God because she listened to the serpent, and Adam made Eve his God because he disobeyed God and he listened to Eve. And it's kind of what happens. You can see these same things occur in today's time. Women are more susceptible to outside influences than men are, but men are very susceptible to women, right? Like these simps out here make up lies, do anything to try to pander to women. And then there's women that would literally throw their kids away, throw their husband away, just to get a Gucci bag, just to have a fun girls trip, just to say, oh, I just want to be selfish and do what I want to do. You get what I'm saying? Like, think about it. The women are 80% of the consumer base. Well, why do all of these, marketing industries and things like that, why do they market to women? Because women buy. Women are easy to be sold to. Men, we a little bit non-agreeable. You put something in front of our face, we can be like, I'm kind of good with what I got. Men are naturally more conservative. Women are the more of the progressive type. It's in their nature to seek and, I'm not really satisfied here. Men are more like, we're content, generally in our proclivities.
Okay, I know you have other people waiting, but I'm just trying to understand where you come from to the point when they in the Garden of Eden and their eyes open, but what they was before their eyes was open. And if you're telling me that, well, it's really a story or metaphor, you're telling me that they had the choice of good and evil before that metaphor became in the book, the good book. But I know, and the way I feel is God is good and his creations are good. Everything that he does is good at all time, and he has no parts of evil, no jealousy, no envy, no hate, none of those things. And in order to feel the good, know the choice of good and evil, and something begilded you to Eve or Adam, it's the same thing that happened on earth, the same thing that happened in heaven. And I feel that it's either two things. It's either God created Lucifer to become Satan and cause this, or he has nothing to do with it. And it's the way I say it, he has nothing to do with it. So I'm not limiting God. He is God, but there's no answer. And the only answer to this, the true answer is we don't know. But I feel, my theory, that something begilded Satan. Something begilded him, but it's not stronger than God. God, he can't create and he can't destroy. But he could put these feelings in you, these emotions of envy and hate and pride. And that's what Lucifer had. He had pride because he was the most beautiful angel, musical, beautiful.
Yeah.
So everything. So
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like think about what I just said, right? Eve made the serpent her God. Adam made Eve his God. Who you listen to, who you let influence you, you make them your God. Like there's many people on the stream right now. I'm sure their God is weed. All they do is wake up in the morning and they wake and bake, they smoke. I'm sure their God is weed. I'm sure their God is a little corn, but replace the C with a P. All they are is masturbating and wanking off all the time. So people make a lot of vices their God, right? So what I'm saying is, Lucifer, he just made other things his God besides the one true God. And human beings are flawed, and angels as well. So the only true perfect entity in being is God, because he always chooses good. This is why he's good all the time. But human beings, right, and angels, well, we're not good all the time. Well, we can be. That's the thing, because God gave us choice. So in free will, so it's like, well, you can be just like me. You can be good all the time, but let's see if you have the discipline to really be good. Let's see if you can really make those sacrifices to really be good. You know what I mean, brother?
Yeah. So in other words, God made Lucifer and one of his beautiful angels, but then Lucifer himself created. He created. This is not what I believe though, but the way it sounds like that, he created lust, envy, jealousy, and hate. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I'm not saying that anyone created that. I'm saying that I'm not saying that, Lucifer created these things. No, these.
So the last thing I said to him was the sins. Lust, envy, jealousy, pride, gluttony, whatever these sins are, I can't see it. I can't see these sins. I can't even touch it. I can't feel, unless it has a host. Either it's a cherub or a human being. It has to find a host in order to see the act of that person. Right? So I'm just going to leave it right here. Right? I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here for you to read between the lines. It's not what they say, it's what they're not saying. I mix the lies with the truth and the truth with the lies. But these humans out here, we love lies and we hate the truth. Right? So I'm going to do the third part. And as you can see, I was clipping out a lot of clips because I was trying to not put my theory in. So the next video, I'm going to let Cooley continue with some good examples of free will and choice. And he has some good examples. And I enjoy listening to Cooley. I really do. I listen to time to time. And this is not to go against him. It's just to show an example about choice, free will, and that's, to me, a label. And there's people out there under the sun that still feels that's a label also. But there's other people that's very religious that does not see it as a label. They see it as an explanation. So in the next video, I'm going to let Cooley still talk about free will and choice, because it's very important that young people understand the difference between choice, free will and choice, and going with the crowd and not going with the crowd, and the repercussions in their actions. And like I said in my last video, and I showed you millennials and Gen Z, I think millennials have a 12-second attention span and Gen Z has a 8 attention span, right? From watching shorts and stuff like that. So I don't want to make this long, 35 minutes tops. And then we're going to move on, and I'm going to let Cooley explain choice and free will and give examples, because I think the brothers and sisters out there need to figure out and know this and stop always being in the victim Olympics. Okay, stop being in the victim Olympics. We have choices. We have vices. We all have vices. We have choices. And I'll get into that in the third one. And no one's perfect under the sun. So, yeah, I will get into that in the third one. And I'll get into my theory. Also, I'll get into my theory and going against my theory, because I found something that could go against it. And then I'll try to, how can I say it? I don't know. You know what? I'm tired of talking. All right? So, like I said, I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here for you to read between the lines. Never here to change your mind. One to the next one.